Hi everyone, thanks for joining today's Microsoft Virtual Academy, where we'll introduce you to Kodu. I'm Megan Rademeyer, and with me today is Matthew Haynes. Matthew, please tell us a little bit about yourself and what you know about coding.
Thank you, Megan. It's really good to be back here again. I'm a teacher. I've been teaching for about 14 years now, and I've been a computer applications teacher for about 6 years. And in that time, I've gotten to develop a passion for technology and integrating it into classes and teaching. And lately, I'm beginning to realize that coding is something that's actually quite important. And I've taken a liking to learning how to code and how to teach coding. And so I've basically been playing with Kodu and seeing how we can use it to teach coding to young children and even older.
Well, that's great to hear, Matthew, because today's webinar is all about getting teachers to see that code is really quite simple. Even somebody that doesn't have your years of experience or background in playing with code or working with IT can create simple games using Kodu. And we're hoping that by the end of this Microsoft Virtual Academy, that teachers who are watching will download Kodu and will try it out and will actually use Kodu in their classrooms because it really is a great program. So what is Kodu?
Well, Kodu is basically, it's referred to as a game lab. It's a program that allows us to create programs or to learn how to code without actually knowing that you're being taught how to code. And you can work with objects and instances, you can have characteristics of properties, all the things we learn about in programming, but in a much more fun and visual environment.
So even if somebody doesn't know all of that terminology, would they still be able to use Kodu?
Very much so, because it's such a visual program. It's iconified, so there's icons for everything. You probably don't even have to know how to read to actually start coding, which is the beauty of this program.
Okay, so to begin with, somebody would first need to download Kodu.
That's true.
And is it free? Is there a cost involved?
No cost at all. Kodu is completely free. It's downloadable. It's about 200 megabytes, I think, which is pretty big, but it's actually not bad with our current bandwidth. I would say you can download it anytime. There's no charge. It installs on any Windows computer, laptop, or a desktop PC.
Okay, so a teacher who wanted to use Kodu in the classroom could go to www.kodugamelab.com and they would hit the Get Kodu button and would download it. And from there, is it quite simple to install it on a computer?
Very simple, straightforward installation, double click, follow the wizard, and you're ready to go.
Okay, so assuming a teacher's done all of that, and they're now ready to launch Kodu. Can you show us what they would see on their screen?
Yeah, sure. I'll just bring up Kodu on my computer here.
So like in the cooking shows, we've downloaded it earlier so that we can jump right in and show people what they'd see. But this looks pretty simple to me. Well, what can a teacher do when they open up this interface?
Well, when you start off with Kodu, you have a very basic interface like this. You have your three-dimensional world where you can add objects. You can create it kind of looks a little bit like Minecraft to begin with. So anyone who's played with Minecraft before would know this, how it looks, how it works. We have a three-dimensional environment. We can kind of spin around. We can zoom in. We can zoom out. And then we can build objects in this 3D world. So when you begin, the first thing to know is how to add objects to your world. And we click on our object tool at the bottom there. We simply click wherever we want to place an object. The nice thing is, because it is so visual, I can now select, well, what kind of object do I want to put? So let's put Kodu himself. We'll just click on Kodu, and there he is. If I'm just going to turn around a little so we can see his face. There we go. Just there he is over there. And here is my toolbar. Everything I need to know how to do is based in this toolbar, and that's where we would begin.
Okay, so you've obviously played with Kodu a bit before, and you knew to sort of click on the toolbar down at the bottom, and some of the basic things that you could do. But one way of learning how to play Kodu would be to just open it up and sort of click on icons and see what happens. But for somebody who doesn't want to go that route and who wants a little bit more guidance or some help, is there a tutorial they could try?
Yes, in fact, I would definitely suggest working through the tutorials. In Kodu, the best way to learn is to actually go through the tutorials, and I'll show you where we go for that. When you start up Kodu, you might get a home menu like this. If not, you'll just click on this little home button right there. As I said,
it's a little house.
Exactly, it's all very visual, so it's very easy to find. And we'll start with loading a world. Every design that we have in Kodu is called a world. So we click on Load World. I'm not going to save the changes, and I'm going to go to Lessons. When I click on Lessons, here we have a complete range of tutorials that anyone, whether it's a teacher or a learner, can actually go through, and you learn all the basics right up to quite complicated techniques in Kodu. So I would say start with the first tutorial. You click on Play. It takes a minute or two to download. The nice thing about going through these tutorials is it is step by step and very easy to follow. You can see on my screen there, it tells you what the tutorial is. If I click on Continue, it tells you what you will be doing and what the goal is of the tutorial. And there you can see. Shall I go through some of the steps?
So maybe take us through the first 2 or 3 steps so we can get the idea.
Okay, so the first thing is I just follow the instructions. Press Escape to go to edit mode. I click on the object tool and I click anywhere on the ground to add a new object. I'm going to add code, and as you can see, I'm just following the instructions.
So you follow the instructions at the top.
That's it, I'm just following, and there you go. I already have feedback from the program telling me, yes, that's great. Let's see what happens. We click on the play button. There's a little play icon there, and the game is now running. Obviously, nothing's going to happen because we haven't done anything in terms of actions or behaviors. But the tutorial then takes you through that again. So I would suggest for any teachers to just work your way through the tutorials if you want to learn how to code or how to work with Kodu, and then how to teach that to your learners as well.
So a teacher starting out could download Kodu, like we said earlier, and then they could work their way through this first tutorial. And maybe if they were not actually an IT or a computer applications technology teacher, they might want to work through these tutorials themselves before the lesson.
I would suggest that, yeah.
To try and stay just sort of one jump ahead of the learners.
Advisable. Yeah.
But also not to be afraid. If the children end up quickly learning more than you do, that's also okay.
Absolutely, and in fact, that's kind of what you want, because you don't want to. Everyone is on a different level in a classroom. And if you had 10, 15 students, playing with Kodu, the best thing to do is just let them explore, let them play, let them figure out what all the things do, what all the various instructions and the painting tools do, because they will learn far quicker than you confining them to step by step by step. For us as teachers, it's a lot easier going step by step, but I think for your learners, let them have fun, let them explore and play.
Yeah, and some children who like a bit of structure and who are very new to coding might want to work step by step through those tutorials. Yes. Other students with a flair for coding,
they'll just jump right in.
Perhaps a prior interest, might just jump right in.
That's it.
And the trick is for a teacher to set a project or an activity up that allows children to take it sort of as far as their interests and abilities allow.
Very good, yes.
So Matt, you started making a little sort of game in Kodu earlier. Do you want to take us through that?
Well, I'll create it for you, and then you can actually see how we created this. So
okay, step by step.
Step by step. I'll start right at the beginning.
We start with that blank canvas, which is what you see when you open Kodu up.
That's it. I'm going to just show you how working with Kodu teaches you the principles of programming without you even realizing it. So I'm going to show you, for example, we're going to put Kodu down over here.
And Kodu is the name of this sort of coding tool.
I think so.
But it's also the name of that little
robot guy.
Character.
Yeah, that's his name. That's his name. So there he is over there. He's just going to sit over there, and then I'm going to add another object. So let's put an object over there. And again, here is an object when you start Kodu, you learn about these apples because he likes to eat apples, you see. So I click on apple. There's an apple down over there. Now I'm going to program Kodu to eat the apple. Now, I want you to see how we go through the various steps. Very, very easy. I simply right-click, I choose Program. Here are my commands. In programming, we always have an object. An object can have various properties or attributes, and there can be behaviors attached to that object. We also have conditionals where if something happens, something else must take place. And I'll show you how that actually works. So for example, when I click on when, so when, let's see.
So this is setting up the condition.
That's it, that's it.
When
so,
something happens.
Yes, so when Kodu can see something, and now we need to tell him what can he see. When he sees an object, and that object is an apple.
Okay.
All right, what do we do? Right, so you can see we've already got an if then else situation. So if he sees an apple, then what do? We click on do, we tell him to move. Where does he move to? He moves towards the apple, and then what's he going to do when he gets there? He's going to eat it. Okay, so let's first take a look and see what our program does. Here we have one simple instruction. So if I go back, press escape, run my little program here, let's take a look. He sees the apple, he moves towards the apple.
Okay, so now if we want to take it a step further, so now he's seen the apple, he's moved towards it, but now he actually wants to eat the apple.
Okay.
Can you go back and edit that code and make it more advanced?
Absolutely. See, we can have as many lines of instructions as we want, because that's essentially what programming is. It's just instructions, line by line. So in my next line of code, when, and now we're going to give another one. So when he bumps into this apple, so when he actually reaches this apple, and we'll tell it again when he reaches the apple, what must he do? So we go over here and he must eat the apple. So let's have a look now at my program and see what it does. Press escape, press play. He sees the apple, he goes towards the apple, and he munches the apple.
Okay.
And there you go.
So and now if you wanted to make your code even more sort of sophisticated, you could have him now, you know, do something else. He's all sort of fed and ready for action.
Yes.
And could then move on to the next activity.
Exactly.
We've even seen some examples where you have to move Kodu sort of through a maze to get to an apple. So
yes, exactly.
So students who quickly get Kodu to get to the apple and eat it could then be challenged by, well, now you've got to make a maze to move Kodu through.
Correct. And the nice thing about Kodu is that you're always learning how to think in a logical, structured way. You've got to be able to think of where are we going, what's going to happen if this happens. And you're learning about objects, you're learning about properties, you're learning about attributes of objects and events and if then else. You're learning all of that, but it's in a very visual, very easy to understand environment.
You know, you used to be a computer teacher. I used to be an English teacher. And I can't help but look at, you know, what you've just done and think of how good it would be for teaching language skills to children.
Yes, yes.
You know, those objects are all nouns. You know, move towards the apple. The apple's a noun.
Yes, correct.
The actions that the Kodu would be doing are all verbs.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you could introduce English vocabulary and terminology at the same time. But actually for students where English is not their first language, all of those icons and pictures also make it quite easy to understand.
They really do. It's a very accessible application, and it goes across language barriers. And because it's so picture-based, it's very easy to just practice, put things in, and you can actually see what's going to happen and then run it and make sure that it does.
And, you know, when we were trying this earlier, it wasn't quite working out. You know, our Kodu was getting stuck and wasn't quite behaving
I had that.
As we wanted him to.
Yes.
But I don't think that's all bad. You know, it teaches children to think about, well, why is Kodu getting stuck?
Yes.
And encourages them to sort of, you know, analyze their code. Where do they think it went wrong?
Mm. Well, I mean, exactly. In terms of your 21st century learning principles and computational thinking skills, the whole point is to get something to fail, to figure out why it failed. And that's the best part about working with Kodu, is that when you get to a point in your code where something is not happening. Like for me, I had a loop where he couldn't get out. He ate a red apple, but he wanted a green one, and he just kept turning around and around and around. I had to figure out what was wrong with my code and why he wasn't moving on to the next apple. And so that was problem-solving skills, which is very easy to teach when you're using such a visual, basic programming language.
And it can also encourage children to work together. You know, maybe one can't figure it out, but he can ask his friend, or maybe somebody else is, you know, good at some other aspect of it.
Very much so.
How could you encourage children to work together on a Kodu game?
I would give them a situation or an example of a scenario where they have to build a 3D world in a specific context. For example, it could be a jungle, or it could be a forest area, or it could be a desert area, and give them a situation where they have many, many elements at play, and introduce another element which could potentially cause damage or havoc, and see how they would code the various items in that environment, and see what would happen when that other element joins in, and then predict. They've got to predict what will happen, and then see what will happen when actually coded.
So you can not only get students working together, but teachers could also work together to come up with a sort of cross-curricular project. You know, get the life sciences teacher involved, or the geography teacher involved, and model a landscape or an ecosystem in Kodu.
Exactly. It gives us access to sort of the physical resources that we might not see in the real world, but you can recreate them in this virtual world. And add physics to the equation and see what happens. It really brings it into a much more hands-on approach.
So you can definitely do a lot with Kodu, but we also don't want to scare teachers off and have them thinking that, oh, this sounds far too technical for me. So if you're worried that you're not going to reach the point where your students are creating their own worlds or working collaboratively, but want to get right down to the basics, you could do what Matt was suggesting earlier, which was go through that first tutorial.
Yes, there's a whole bunch there,
and step by step. But on the Microsoft Educator community, there's also a great course, Intro to Kodu, where you could learn the Kodu basics. And there are very short little videos showing people how to get started with simple things like navigating the Kodu world, saving your world, modifying the algorithms. So teachers that just getting their feet wet with coding and want some basic sort of tips and strategies could look there.
Yes.
Where else could somebody get some help with Kodu?
Well, directly on the Kodu Game Labs website, there's a whole community there. There's a forum, there's support groups. There are lots and lots of worlds and tutorials that you can download and then play with, edit, see how things go. I had to learn some slightly more complicated commands, and I got that by looking at other worlds and other actions that other people had done. So I would suggest that that's another route to take as well.
And if somebody doesn't want to create their own world from that blank canvas that they begin with, is there a way to sort of build in somebody else's world?
Absolutely. You'll see that if we go to the menu of Kodu, I'm just going to move my screen a little. If we go back to the home page here, and we go to load world, you could download worlds from other, but here we have all the lessons, samples would be available online. You can basically load any one of these. These are worlds that other people have created or that Kodu's made available, and you can edit them, play with them, change things, change the environment, and really just experiment if you don't want to first create your own world. Just see what's possible, and then maybe that will inspire you to then build your own.
So, and also if a teacher was wanting to use Kodu to do something in life sciences or in geography, and they didn't want the students to waste a whole lot of time building the world to begin with, they could give them that starter world and rather have them spend the bulk of their time doing something within that world.
True, a teacher can create their own world, save it as a file, and actually export that file, and the students can simply download it and open it up on their computers right away.
And also for teachers looking for ideas and inspiration, it's also always nice to see what other teachers have done and their sample lessons that can be sort of adapted or maybe used as is.
Yes, even on the Kodu Game Lab website, there are many tutorials which demonstrate cross-curricular learning activities as well. So how it blends in with other subject material and how you can actually integrate all of that. So it actually is for everyone.
Okay, so the trick is really to have a look around, see what's available, see what applies to your subject area, or perhaps to a cross-curricular project that you've got coming up, and now you, having seen this virtual academy, you're now thinking, how could I integrate a bit of Kodu into it? Matt, I want to go back to the simple programming language and how it's icon-based. We have talked about this a bit when you were doing your demo, but I think it's such an important feature of Kodu that it's worth mentioning again.
Yes.
What do you think are some of the advantages of using Kodu to introduce basic coding as opposed to some of the other sort of simple coding sort of tools that are out there?
I think for me, the biggest advantage is that age is no longer a limit. You can actually start at a very, very young age, teaching the basic principles of programming from 5 or 6 years up. Because it is so visual, it's so icon-based, it's so easy for small children to see what is going on because they are visual. You give a child a tablet, they know exactly what to do because it's a very visual device. Everything is icon. So what they will do is they will just jump right in. They're not scared to make mistakes. But I think the biggest thing of Kodu, the visual aspect, that it is big, it's easy to work with. You can use a mouse, a keyboard, a touch screen. It's really simple. They've designed it to be accessible to as young age as possible.
Yeah, I mean, little kids, you see them all the time playing on a parent's smartphone or on a tablet. Yes,
they're very comfortable with that.
So Kodu doesn't actually work on a tablet or a smartphone. You would need a Windows laptop or a Windows computer.
Yes.
But it works particularly nicely if you do have a touchscreen,
like
what you were
It is a lot
demoing
easier
earlier.
Yes.
But is a touchscreen absolutely necessary?
Not at all, no. I don't have a touchscreen and I've been using just a mouse and a keyboard the whole time. And it's very easy to work with.
And it's simple and easy to do.
Very easy. You can scroll up and down through all your options. Even with your arrow keys, it's very quick to select options. It's really not a hindrance at all. In fact,
Kodu's been around for quite some time.
It has.
Yeah, it's been around for longer than we've had access to, sort of affordable touch screens. So you can definitely do it with just a normal Windows laptop or Windows sort of PC.
Yes.
And it'll work. Even kids who can't read would still be able to look at those icons and would be able to work with them.
Very easy, yes, definitely.
And children who perhaps English is not their medium of instruction or their mother tongue would still be able to recognize those images and would learn a lot of English vocabulary, whilst
the same time,
playing around with
True.
us. So to get back to Kodu and how it can be used to introduce computer science. You were saying earlier that Kodu exposes students to a lot of that computer science terminology. But would a teacher need to explicitly teach that terminology?
I don't think so, because for me, the beauty of working with such a visual block-based coding program is that they're inherently learning. They're learning, what's it called, incidental learning.
Yes.
And so they are learning as they go the very principles of programming without explicitly being taught those principles. They're learning about logic, they're learning about decisions, algorithms, they're learning about computational thinking. So if I do this, how do I fix this? If that happens, what do I do next? How do I make sure, Kodu goes there and not there? So all of those skills are built into just the simplest interface, and that's the beauty of working with Kodu.
I almost think it would ruin the magic of Kodu if a teacher then tried to formally teach, that computer science terminology. But the concepts would definitely be acquired through playing around with Kodu. And even if a child doesn't know what an algorithm is and couldn't define an algorithm, they've been working with algorithms the whole time that they've been creating their game. We also mentioned earlier around some of the 21st century skills that Kodu can build.
Yes.
So collaboration's one, sort of communicating with others, even failing, like you were saying earlier, and instead of collapsing in a heap, trying to figure out what went wrong and how to make it work. And the interface is really simple, so that even beginner students can use it. But those with more advanced skills or a real flair for it can really push the boundaries and can develop imaginative games. We've also talked a little bit about Kodu for cross-curricular projects. But can you think of some of the ways that Kodu could work in a subject like maths, for example?
Absolutely, because we're working with such a grid-based application in terms of the layout of the land, we've got all sorts of mathematical applications. We've got a 3D environment, so we have depth, we have height, we've got distance, all these calculations that we can play with. We've got things like volume, how much space would something take up, cubic meters or cubic centimeters. All of those concepts are mathematical concepts which we can actually build and recreate in this 3D environment. Along with the physics that goes with that, we could create waterfalls, we could work out the flow, the rate of water flow, what makes things sink, what makes things float, density. All of that can be built into maths, physics, science.
So a teacher could even set up an activity where the child's required to design a Kodu world that's so big by so big.
Yes,
or,
exactly.
Work within specific parameters.
Build a dam, considering the water crisis we've had in South Africa for the last few years, they could build a new dam structure, a new system for dams and rivers, and figure out how much water is that going to hold, how's that river going to connect from this dam to that reservoir, for example.
And speaking of water, one of the really nice life sciences lessons that's sort of cited as an example on the Kodu website is around modeling the water cycle using Kodu. So that's another nice application that could be used by a geography teacher or a life sciences teacher.
Yes.
Another one that caught my eye was a lesson around a cyber salmon. And, we don't have sort of salmon swimming upstream in South Africa.
Not too many, I don't know.
But the concept of getting a fish to move through an ecosystem and what happens when its path is blocked by something like a dam.
Yes.
And coping with that.
That's it.
Can you think of some science lessons that could be integrated into Kodu?
No.
Well,
off the top of my head.
Well, I mean,
not having taught science.
You've probably already mentioned
I've probably got a couple.
Developing and testing theories. I think is applying scientific principles.
You could build. What I would do then in terms of that is the nice thing with programming is you have an object. An object has properties and attributes which then can correlate or correspond to other objects, and we have events. And I know in science there's always, cause and effect. And that is really nice in programming in terms of conditions and what happens if this hits that thing, what will happen next. So in science, there could be a lot of cause and effect scenarios which we could recreate in the Kodu 3D environment. Yeah, so I would definitely think about that. Yeah.
And definitely modeling some of the attributes and properties of certain substances.
Yes,
why do some items sink and some float?
That's it. You've got fire, you've got water, there are all these elements you can create and give those properties and attributes to. See what happens when you bring something into that environment.
Yeah, I already mentioned in terms of integrating Kodu into the language classroom around looking at Kodu in terms of parts of speech, verbs, which are the same as actions, and nouns, which are the same as objects. But you could also create a really nice storytelling environment in Kodu.
Yes, it really does lend itself to that because your world is not limited. You can create as big a canvas as you like. And you can have, from one story to another or one page of a story to another and have all these commands running the whole time. It's beautiful. It really is nice.
Okay, so the object of today's lesson was really to encourage teachers to download Kodu and give it a try. We really would encourage you to do the Intro to Kodu course on the Microsoft Educator community because it guides you step by step through some of the basics of using Kodu, as well as the tutorials that are available on the Kodu website. If you didn't catch the URL earlier, just do a search for download Kodu. It's free, it's easy to download, and work your way through those tutorials. and really just get your hands dirty. Actually,
That's it. Best way to
try it
learn.
out. You're not going to break it.
Nope.
And you know, you can spend an hour or two sort of working through Kodu by yourself before introducing it to your class. But also, don't be afraid to just let the kids at it.
That's it.
And to learn from them and let them learn from one another.
Yeah, that's kind of what I would say. I would say, you know, first go look at the education.microsoft.com site and go through a couple of those videos. I think there's 3 or 4. And then second step would be to download the software and install it on your computer. Third step is either play and just see what you can figure out on your own, or go through the tutorials. And then the last step is give it to the kids and let them just explore.
And I think the final step is then think about some meaningful educational context.
Yes.
Where it could relate to some topic that they're covering as part of their curriculum in another subject, or perhaps work with a teacher colleague and try and come up with a project. So that they're having fun learning those coding skills and playing around with Kodu, but they're actually doing it for some meaningful educational activity.
Yes. And hopefully sort of the penny drops in a year or 2 later if they do decide to take information technology or computer science, that when they are taught explicitly, like this is an algorithm or this is the flow of data, that they go, oh, well, we did this in the game and this is the same as the game, and then the lights come on.
And in fact, working with something like Kodu may very well encourage students to actually want to pursue IT as a subject, because they'll realize that actually this coding is not complete rocket science. This is something that I've done before and have quite enjoyed.
We demystify the whole concept of the subject.
Yeah, definitely. So Matt, what would you say is an appropriate age for kids to try out Kodu? You say even young learners can try it.
Yes, I think the nice thing with Kodu is because of the way it's been put together and created to be a very visual interface, I would say if a learner or a kid or a child can operate a mouse or a keyboard, they can work with Kodu. I'd say from 5 or 6 onwards. And there's no age limit after that.
Okay. I think you're quite right. It definitely can be used by young learners all the way through. Sort of maybe it's best suited to primary school, and maybe older learners might want to try something more challenging.
Yes.
But high school learners that haven't had an opportunity to do coding before might find this a great start and a great intro.
Definitely.
We've talked a bit about the equipment required, but I just want to stress that again. What would somebody need?
Basically, just a laptop or a desktop PC running Windows 10, I would say, and internet access in order to download the game and also to download any tutorials that they'd want to see. But the tutorials are actually very small in file size. They download very quickly. Okay.
And a teacher that was working at a school with limited connectivity could download those Kodu installation files onto a flash drive, and could then load it from there into a number of computers. So you wouldn't have to download all sort of 200 megs, for each machine.
No. And it works perfectly offline as well. You obviously can't download anything new, but you can work with Kodu offline very comfortably.
Okay, excellent. And we've also talked about the level of computer skill. This really is suited for beginners all the way up to students with quite a bit of skill that would obviously be able to do more with Kodu.
Oh, far more, yes.
But even beginners who are just sort of able to access Kodu and use a mouse would learn through doing.
Absolutely.
So that brings us to the end of this virtual academy. I'm really hoping that teachers give Kodu a whirl in their classrooms.
That would be great.
It really would be, and that they look online for some of those support tutorials and the Intro to Kodu course on the Microsoft Educator community, and they'll be well on their way. And really, it's just about giving it a whirl. It's not difficult at all. Give it a go, download it, and try it in your class. Your kids will love it. Thanks so much for joining me, Matt.
Thank you, Megan.
And join us for the next Microsoft Virtual Academy as we give you other ideas of simple coding tools that you can use to introduce basic computer science in your classroom. I hope you'll join us for those. Bye.